On a dark, gloomy November day in 1965, my uncle, Martin Mitchell, was 17 years old and had just finished work in Dublin city centre. It was a miserable day. Rain was pelting onto the ground, but Martin could not afford the bus home. He decided to walk to Ballyfermot, where he lived with his mother, father and 7 siblings. He eventually got to that cramped family home, and within 2 hours, he was dead. Martin's kidneys had stopped working weeks previously. His lungs had filled with fluid and his body had given up. He died completely unaware that he had a rare genetic disease that would go on to take the life of his little brother, his mother, and change the lives of even more. Martin had Alport syndrome, a rare inherited renal disease. I'm going to talk to my family about how this disease has affected them and try to find out more about this remarkably rare syndrome. I want to learn about the illness that has cursed my family for many years, and remember all of the extraordinary people I never got a chance to meet as a result of this.
Do you want to go have tea? Oh, thanks.
You may notice I'm talking quite loudly throughout this interview. That's because my dad is hard of hearing as a result of Alport syndrome.
Hello, my name is Philip Mitchell. I'm 62, my next birthday. I'm a park ranger in Dublin City Council. I live with my wife Irene, Kerry and Amy, my daughters.
Where are you from?
Ballyfermot. And I went to school in Ballyfermot until my mother died from kidney disease. And I lived in Ballymon for 19 years until I met my wife, and then we bought a house in Swords, which we are still in.
What is the illness you have called?
I got an Alport's
syndrome.
Syndrome. It's a kidney disease that runs in the family, which is very rare.
And do many people know about the illness?
It wasn't common when I first knew, but I never met anybody else with it. But there is a few coming into the system now that wasn't before. Wasn't maybe.
And do doctors know about it?
Well, they know now, yeah. They know.
But when you first got it, what did they say?
Yeah, they knew about it, but it was very rare. I was told there's only 3 families in Ireland that had it. That was back in 1980 that they know of.
How many people were in your family?
Paddy, Jimmy, John and Mary. John and Mary are twins. And Bernard, Domo, and myself, Philip.
How did your brother Martin die?
My brother Martin died when one night time he came home. He wasn't feeling well. So they called an ambulance, and I was only 10, so we were in bed, and when we woke up we were told Martin died. But all through the years, I heard my mother said that his lungs was full of water. He obviously wasn't passing water, and his lungs was full of water. He must have his kidney must have stopped straight away, yes.
And what age were you when your mother died?
When my mother died, I was just 11. That was 1968. Martin died in 67. 7 months after my mother died. She was always in hospital, not well, but I remember there used to be a nun coming up to see her once a week to give her a needle. I don't know what needle was, but it ends up must have been something to do with the kidney disease. I remember the nun used to have a little motorcycle coming up. It's a small engine, like a lawnmower engine, more so than anything. She died in Jervis Street Hospital. I'm told she died in the lift going up to dialysis, but to try and give her one last chance, but she didn't make it. You know. Well, I was out playing football in the park, and the game was over, and just when me and Domo, my brother, were walking home, this little fella, he was only about 2 years younger than me, he ran up to her and said, "Your mother died." And we thought he was messing. Yeah. So we saw the father walking down to us, and he said, and he said, yes, your mother did die. So it was a long walk back home, and all the neighbours was out and looking at us, and this wasn't good. This wasn't good.
And was that in Ballyfermot?
That was in Ballyfermot.
And what about John?
John was in hospital for a long time. They didn't know what it was because it could, kidney disease is funny to find out. In those days they were looking for different things, but then it came too late, and he's died.
And what year was that?
That was the 26th of October, the 6th of October, 1974.
And how did it affect your life when you were younger, like your childhood?
Well, it affects my life because I didn't go to school. I was asked to go over to England. It was supposed to be for a holiday for 2 months to live with my brother Paddy and his wife, and end up a year. I was a year over there, and I was only 11, and I started being a young boy over there, and then I ended up being babysitting kids at 11, and this wasn't good, so I didn't go to school then, and I only spent a few months then in school, and I back home after that, and then I went back to England again, and I didn't go back to school then, so I left school at 11 really, because my mother died, and those days my father was afraid that the social service will take us away because there would be no one to mind us. Me and Dama went over. Bernard was working. But Dama went to school because he was 13 when my mother died. And then he stayed over there while I came home. I missed all my friends, and there was no football. Didn't play football or friends for a year. And so I couldn't get home fast enough.
My sister Amy was diagnosed with kidney failure due to Alport syndrome at the age of 18. This was a big shock for my family.
It wasn't good because we were told when Amy was a baby that she does have it because she had protein in her urine. It's a small thing you can't see it with the naked eye, and we went to Tapestry, and the kidney specialist there said she'd be around 40 if she gets it. It's not supposed to affect women as much as men, but and it wasn't expecting her to go on until she was 40. By then I thought, so kidney disease won't be too bad then. They will find some wonderful cure for it. But she went on at 18, which was a big surprise. She was unlucky. That's the way it was, you know.
Alport syndrome has always been an important factor in my life. I knew it was the reason my dad had to go to the doctor so often and why my sister had to drop out of college. But I never knew about the technical side. I decided to go to Beaumont Hospital to interview my family's nephrology doctor, Dr. Mark Denton.
There's 17 there, is it?
I spent a lot of my childhood in the corridors of this hospital. I would regularly go to appointments with my dad during school holidays and visit my sister when she had a number of operations. I have a strange relationship with this place. It's oddly nostalgic. Like as a coping mechanism for all the sickness and sadness going on around me, Beaumont Hospital became a safe space where the people I loved went to get better.
I would say it's probably maybe, of all people on dialysis, it's 0.5% to 1% of those. It's a condition that passes down in families. That's also known as an inherited condition. And it is a genetic defect, should we say, that leads to an abnormal protein that is seen in the filtering units of the kidney called glomeruli. And type 4 collagen in Alport syndrome, there's an abnormality of that protein. It ultimately might be picked up by seeing a bit of blood in the urine and a bit of protein in the urine when the urine is dipped with known as a dipstick. A urinalysis is the term for that. And then blood tests may be done which show that the kidney function is not 100%. Patients with Alport syndrome may head on to dialysis. And in others, it can also lead to a hearing abnormality. So type 4 collagen is also in parts of the ear. And so, classically it causes kidney failure with deafness. This is how a proportion are. But not everyone, and it might not affect hearing in a proportion of patients. Just causes causes kidney failure.
Would a patient usually go straight on dialysis?
Normally it's picked up in advance. It's kind of rare for people to just suddenly be diagnosed and need dialysis straight away, but that obviously can happen. Normally these patients are identified and followed in the kidney clinic before ultimately they go on to dialysis, yeah.
What is the purpose of dialysis and how does it work?
So when the kidney function is very, very poor, what that leads to is accumulation of waste products in the body, and patients generally feel very unwell with nausea, poor appetite, and feeling very low in energy. Normally that's in the setting when the function of the kidney is less than 10%. And these patients need to go on to dialysis. And basically what dialysis does is takes over the function of the kidney, only partially, but it basically provides enough function that what the kidneys normally do to enable you to carry on. Ultimately, of course, we want patients, if they can, to get a kidney transplant. So there are two types of dialysis. One is called hemodialysis, which is done in the hospital, whereby blood goes to the dialysis machine and it's cleaned and then returns back to the patient. That's hemodialysis. And then the other form of dialysis is the one that's done at home, called peritoneal dialysis, which doesn't involve blood going to a machine. It's just fluids going into the tummy, washing away the waste products and then leaving.
And how long at the moment would patients typically stay on dialysis, like the list, how long?
Once you're on dialysis, to stay alive you need to stay on dialysis. It's rare for the kidney function to come back a bit. So you will stay on dialysis either until ultimately you passed away if you weren't available to get a transplant. But if you were on the transplant list, you would normally get a transplant within 2 to 3 years. Now, that is what's known as a deceased donor transplant, which is a kidney that's come from someone who has died. If there is a relative who can donate, a relative or a close friend who can donate a kidney, then the patient may be able to get that transplant much sooner and not be on dialysis as long.
And would the deceased transplants be more common?
20 to 30% of the transplants are done from living people, and the remaining would be deceased donors. So the deceased donor transplant is more common, but there are certain countries where it's actually more common for living donation. And the different transplant units would vary in terms of the percentage of transplants done through living donation versus deceased donation.
And how long typically would a transplanted kidney last?
The average number of years that 50% of the kidneys would, and that is approximately 15 years. So that means 20, a quarter of transplants would last less time than that, and a quarter would last more time than that. So, but we generally, expect 15 to 20 years. We're very pleased with 15 to 20 years, but often it can be longer than that, but unfortunately sometimes it's shorter than that.